For most Americans, property taxes feel unavoidable. You can pay off your mortgage. You can own your home outright, but the tax bill? That never goes away. Miss it, and the government can still take your house. That's why what's happening in 2026 is catching people off guard. Quietly, several U.S. states are moving towards zero, or near zero, property taxes for large groups of homeowners. Not as a rumor, not as a political talking point, but through exemptions, caps, age-based relief, and structural loopholes that effectively erase the bill. And no, this isn't just for the ultra-wealthy. In some states, retirees are paying nothing. In others, primary residences are shielded. In a few, property taxes exist on paper, but not in practice if you meet certain criteria. This shift is happening for one main reason: competition. States are fighting for residents, retirees, remote workers, capital. And as housing affordability collapses in high-tax states, property taxes have become the pressure point governments are finally willing to adjust. But here's the catch: these policies aren't advertised. Most people only find out after they move, or worse, after they've already locked themselves into a high-tax state with no exit plan. In this video, we're breaking down 8 U.S. states where property taxes are being reduced to zero, or functionally eliminated, how these systems actually work, who qualifies, and what trade-offs come with them. Because zero property tax doesn't always mean what people think it means. Some states shift the burden elsewhere. Others rely on sales tax. Some carve out exemptions so specific they might as well be invisible unless you know where to look. Before we get into the list, hit like, subscribe, and share this video. Because tax policy like this can literally change where people choose to live. Now let's start with the first state quietly making property taxes disappear. State number 1, Alaska. Property taxes functionally zero for many homeowners. When people hear no property tax, Alaska is usually the first state mentioned, but most Americans don't understand why it works here or who actually benefits. Alaska doesn't have a statewide property tax. Instead, property taxes are handled at the local level, and that distinction matters. Many boroughs charge little to nothing, and several rural areas have no property tax at all. But even in places where taxes technically exist, the real story is how residents offset them. First, Alaska has no state income tax. That alone changes the math. But the bigger factor is the Permanent Fund Dividend, PFD, the annual payment Alaska residents receive from oil revenues. In strong years, that check can cover most or all of a homeowner's property tax bill. For retirees and low to moderate income households, this creates a situation where property taxes are effectively zero. The bill exists, but the state sends you enough money to cancel it out. In rural Alaska, it goes even further. Entire regions operate without formal property tax systems. Homes may be assessed at extremely low values, and enforcement is minimal. In some villages, land is communally managed or tied to native corporations, eliminating traditional taxation altogether. That's the part no one advertises. The trade-offs are real. Services are limited. Infrastructure is sparse. Costs for goods can be high. But for people prioritizing long-term housing security, Alaska quietly offers something rare: ownership without perpetual tax pressure. This is why Alaska continues to attract retirees, off-grid homeowners, and people seeking low fixed expenses. If your income is stable and your expectations are realistic, Alaska can mean owning a home without writing a property tax check that actually hurts. It's not flashy. It's not suburban America, but for many residents, property tax is a non-issue, and that's the point. State number 2, Nevada. Zero property tax for select homeowners through structure, not promises. Nevada technically has property taxes, but in practice, many homeowners experience something very close to zero. Here's how. Nevada caps property tax rates and severely limits how fast assessed values can rise. That means even during housing booms, tax bills barely move. In some counties, increases are capped at 3% per year or less, regardless of market price. Now, layer in Nevada's generous exemptions. Veterans, disabled residents, seniors, and surviving spouses can qualify for property tax abatements that dramatically reduce or eliminate the bill entirely. In some cases, the exemption exceeds the annual tax owed. That's how people end up paying zero. Nevada also has no state income tax, which allows local governments to rely more on sales taxes, tourism revenue, and gaming income. That reduces pressure to squeeze homeowners. In rural Nevada, property taxes are already minimal due to low assessed values. Add exemptions and many owners simply don't pay. Even in urban areas like Las Vegas or Reno, Longtime homeowners are often shocked by how low their tax bills remain compared to states like California, New York, or Illinois. The state's constitution plays a role too. Nevada voters approved limits that prevent property taxes from being used as a runaway revenue source. That legal structure makes true tax explosions nearly impossible. The downside? Public services can feel thin. Schools rely heavily on alternative funding. Infrastructure growth is slower. But for homeowners, the benefit is predictability. In 2026, predictability matters more than ever. People fleeing high-tax states often land in Nevada expecting lower costs, and are surprised to find their property tax effectively disappears after exemptions and caps kick in. Nevada doesn't market itself as zero property tax. It doesn't need to. The structure does the work quietly, and that's why so many homeowners stay. State number 3, Tennessee. How property taxes quietly drop to zero for thousands of homeowners. Tennessee rarely makes headlines for eliminating property taxes. Yet in 2026, it has quietly become one of the most effective states in the country for reducing property tax bills to near zero, especially for retirees and fixed-income homeowners. The reason is not a single sweeping policy, but a layered system that works together in ways most people never notice. First, Tennessee already starts from a low baseline. Property tax rates in Tennessee are among the lowest in the United States, particularly outside of major metro counties. In many rural and mid-sized counties, annual property taxes on a modest home can be only a few $100s. But the real story begins with Tennessee's Property Tax Relief Program. This program targets seniors aged 65 and older, disabled homeowners, and disabled veterans. If a homeowner meets the age or disability requirement and falls below a specific household income threshold, the state refunds property taxes paid on their primary residence. That refund is not symbolic. In many cases, it covers 100% of the property tax bill. This creates an unusual but powerful dynamic. Homeowners technically pay property taxes, but by the end of the year, the money is returned. For those households, property tax becomes a temporary cash flow issue rather than a permanent expense. For retirees living on Social Security, pensions, or modest retirement accounts, this matters enormously. Fixed incomes don't stretch easily when taxes rise, and Tennessee's system directly addresses that pressure. There's another factor most people overlook: assessment lag. Tennessee property assessments often trail real market values, especially in rural counties. Homes purchased before the recent housing boom may still be assessed far below current market prices. That keeps tax bills artificially low, even as property values rise. Now add Tennessee's lack of a state income tax on wages. This increases disposable income and makes even small tax bills easier to absorb or eliminate through refunds. For many retirees, the math works like this: low assessed value plus low tax rate plus tax relief refund equals zero net property tax. This is why Tennessee continues to attract older homeowners from states like Illinois, New Jersey, New York, and California, where property taxes never stop rising. These newcomers often arrive shocked by how little they owe, and even more surprised when they get refunded. Of course, there are trade-offs. Public services vary widely by county. School funding can be uneven. Infrastructure improvements may lag behind growth. But for homeowners focused on cost control and predictability, Tennessee offers something increasingly rare: stability. In 2026, stability matters more than ideology. Tennessee doesn't call itself a zero property tax state. It doesn't need to. For tens of thousands of homeowners, the system quietly does the job without fanfare. State number 4, South Dakota. Engineering property taxes out of existence through structure. South Dakota doesn't promise zero property taxes, but its system is built so efficiently that for many homeowners, the bill effectively disappears. The foundation of this system is simplicity. South Dakota has no state income tax. That alone reduces pressure on property taxes as a revenue source. Instead, the state relies heavily on sales taxes, tourism revenue, agriculture, and business activity to fund government operations. Property taxes exist, but they are deliberately constrained. The most powerful tool is the assessment freeze for the elderly and disabled. Once a qualifying homeowner enrolls, the assessed value of their property is frozen at its current level. Even if market prices rise, the taxable value does not. That freeze alone prevents tax bills from growing. For longtime homeowners who entered the program years ago, this has massive effects. Their homes may be worth significantly more today, but taxes are calculated as if the appreciation never happened. Now add South Dakota's property tax reduction programs, which provide credits or refunds based on income. Seniors and disabled residents with modest earnings often qualify for reductions that erase most, or all, of their remaining tax obligation. In rural counties, where assessed values are already low, these exemptions can wipe out the tax bill entirely. Agricultural land receives even stronger protections. Farmland and ranch properties are assessed based on productivity rather than market value. That keeps taxes extremely low, even when land prices increase due to speculation or development pressure. This is intentional policy. South Dakota wants people to stay. It wants farms to remain operational. It wants retirees to settle without fear of losing their homes to taxes. Another overlooked factor is enforcement culture. South Dakota does not aggressively reassess properties every year the way some high-tax states do. Assessments change slowly and conservatively, which further limits tax growth. The downside is limited government services. South Dakota's infrastructure is modest, social programs are lean, residents often rely on personal responsibility rather than state support. But that trade-off is precisely what attracts people who prioritize ownership security over government expansion. In 2026, as property tax revolts grow louder across the country, South Dakota's quiet model stands out. Homeowners aren't protesting because the system isn't crushing them. For many residents, especially retirees, farmers, and long-time homeowners, property taxes have become so small they no longer influence financial decisions. They still exist on paper, but in practice, they've been engineered out of relevance. State number 5, Wyoming, where property taxes barely exist and often vanish entirely. Wyoming is one of the most misunderstood tax states in America, and in 2026, it's quietly operating as close to a zero property tax environment as the U.S. allows. Technically, Wyoming does have property taxes, but in practice, for many homeowners, they are so low and so aggressively offset that they functionally disappear. Here's why. First, Wyoming has no state income tax. That alone reshapes how government funding works. Instead of leaning heavily on homeowners, the state relies on energy revenues, mineral extraction, tourism, and sales taxes. That reduces pressure to inflate property tax rates. Second, Wyoming assesses property at exceptionally low effective rates. Residential property is assessed at only a fraction of market value, and mill levies are kept intentionally low across most counties. Even before exemptions, tax bills are among the lowest in the country. Now layer in exemptions. Wyoming offers property tax refunds and exemptions for seniors and disabled residents, particularly those on fixed incomes. For qualifying households, refunds can eliminate a large portion or all of the annual property tax bill. In rural counties, where home values are modest and assessments are conservative, the combination of low valuation and refunds often reduces property taxes to zero in real terms. There's also a political factor most people overlook. Wyoming's population is small, and voters are overwhelmingly resistant to tax increases. Property tax hikes are politically dangerous. That keeps reassessments slow and rates stable. Another key point is enforcement. Wyoming does not reassess property aggressively year after year, the way high-tax states do. Increases are gradual. Sudden spikes are rare. For longtime homeowners, this creates stability. A home purchased decades ago may still be taxed at a valuation far below current market price. Add it all together, and the outcome is clear. Many Wyoming homeowners pay so little in property tax that it no longer factors into their financial planning. The trade-offs? Limited services, long distances, harsh winters, and fewer healthcare options in rural areas. But for homeowners prioritizing ownership security over convenience, Wyoming delivers something powerful: near-permanent housing costs. In 2026, as Americans grow increasingly hostile toward endless taxation on owned property, Wyoming's model looks less extreme and more intentional. Property taxes exist, but they rarely bite. State number 6, Florida. How property taxes hit zero for millions through exemptions, not headlines. Florida is often discussed for what it doesn't tax, income, but far less attention is paid to how its property tax system quietly eliminates taxes for millions of homeowners. Florida does not have zero property tax on paper, but for a massive portion of residents, especially seniors, long-term homeowners, and disabled individuals, the effective rate is zero. The foundation of Florida's system is the homestead exemption. Primary residences qualify for a significant reduction in taxable value, automatically lowering property tax bills. But the real power lies in the Save Our Homes cap, which limits how much a home's assessed value can increase each year, regardless of market price. This cap is critical. Home values in Florida have exploded over the past decade, but assessments for homesteaded properties often lag dramatically. Homeowners who purchased years ago may be taxed as if prices never rose. Now add senior exemptions. Florida allows additional property tax exemptions for homeowners aged 65 and older, particularly those with limited income. In many counties, these exemptions stack, meaning the taxable value of the home drops to near zero. Disabled veterans receive even stronger protections. Many qualify for 100% property tax exemption on their primary residence. For these households, property tax does not exist in any practical sense. Florida also allows local governments to implement further exemptions, which many counties do to attract retirees. The result is a patchwork system where neighbors can have vastly different tax bills, even on identical homes. The critics argue this shifts the burden to newer buyers. That's true. But for those already protected by exemptions, the system works exactly as designed. Another overlooked factor is portability. Florida allows homeowners to transfer assessment caps to new homes within the state. That means even after moving, longtime residents can preserve their low tax base. This is one reason Florida continues to attract retirees, despite rising insurance and HOA costs. Property taxes remain predictable, or non-existent. The downside is infrastructure strain and uneven public funding. But politically, Florida has chosen homeowner protection over uniform taxation. In 2026, Florida doesn't advertise zero property tax, but millions of residents live as if it already exists. State number 7, Texas. How property taxes drop to zero for specific homeowners. Texas is famous for high property taxes, so it sounds contradictory to include it on a list about zero property tax. But in 2026, Texas absolutely belongs here, if you understand who qualifies and how the system actually works. Texas does not have a state income tax, which means local governments rely heavily on property taxes. On the surface, that seems hostile to homeowners. But Texas has also built some of the strongest exemptions in the country, and for certain groups, those exemptions reduce property taxes to zero. The most powerful is the 100% disabled veteran exemption. If a homeowner is classified as 100% disabled through the VA, Texas completely eliminates property taxes on their primary residence. No partial reduction, no cap, zero. The home can be worth $150,000 or $1.5 million. The tax bill is erased. This exemption also extends to surviving spouses under certain conditions, meaning the benefit can last beyond the original homeowner. Next is the over 65 homestead exemption. Homeowners aged 65 and older receive significant reductions in taxable value, and, more importantly, their school district taxes are frozen. That freeze prevents tax bills from rising even if property values soar. In some cases, when combined with local exemptions and low-income relief, seniors see their property taxes reduced so aggressively that the remaining balance is negligible or eliminated entirely. Texas also allows deferrals for seniors and disabled homeowners. This doesn't erase taxes up front, but it prevents collection for life. Taxes accrue but cannot be enforced until the home is sold or transferred. For many retirees, that effectively means they never pay. In rural Texas counties, assessed values are often conservative, and local governments may offer additional relief to keep long-term residents in place. When exemptions stack, tax bills can drop to zero in practice. The trade-offs are real. New buyers often shoulder higher taxes. Infrastructure funding can feel uneven. But Texas has made a clear policy choice: protect certain homeowners aggressively, even if others pay more. In 2026, for disabled veterans and qualifying seniors, Texas isn't a high-tax state at all. It's a zero property tax state hiding in plain sight. State number 8, New Hampshire, where property taxes disappear through offset, not elimination. New Hampshire doesn't abolish property taxes, but it neutralizes them in a way few states can replicate. There is no state income tax on wages and no sales tax. That means property taxes are the primary funding source for local governments. On paper, rates look high, but here's what most people miss. New Hampshire uses a circuit breaker-style relief system that refunds or offsets property taxes for qualifying residents, especially seniors. The Elderly Property Tax Relief Program allows towns to reduce or eliminate property taxes for homeowners aged 65 and older who meet income and asset limits. Many towns go further than the state minimum, offering near-total exemptions. For low to moderate-income seniors, this can result in property taxes being reduced to zero. There's also the low-income property tax relief mechanism, which refunds taxes that exceed a certain percentage of household income. When property taxes become burdensome relative to income, the state steps in. Another key factor is New Hampshire's education funding equalization system. The state redistributes education taxes so that some homeowners effectively get their school taxes refunded or offset at the state level. In practice, this creates a scenario where homeowners write a tax check, but later recover much of it through credits or refunds. For retirees who plan carefully, the net cost can be zero. New Hampshire also reassesses property conservatively compared to boom state norms. Homes owned long-term may be assessed far below market value, keeping initial tax bills lower before relief programs apply. The downside? Municipal budgets are tight. Services vary dramatically by town. New Hampshire expects residents to be engaged and informed, but for homeowners willing to navigate the system, the payoff is huge. In 2026, New Hampshire offers a rare equation: no income tax, no sales tax, and property taxes that can be erased through relief rather than repeal. It's not simple, but it works. If there's one thing this list proves, it's this: zero property tax isn't a headline, it's a system. None of these states wake up and announce, property taxes are gone. Instead, they use exemptions, freezes, refunds, and legal structures that quietly erase the bill for millions of homeowners who know how to qualify. And that's the real divide in 2026. Some people are trapped in high-tax states, watching their housing costs rise no matter how much they pay down their mortgage. Others are living in states where ownership actually means security, where taxes stop growing or disappear altogether. But here's the warning most people miss. These systems only work if you act early. Exemptions can be capped. Income limits can change. Local governments can close loopholes when budgets tighten. And once demand surges, states rarely expand benefits. They restrict them. That means timing matters more than ever. If you already own in one of these states, the smartest move isn't ignoring your tax bill, it's understanding every exemption you qualify for. Many homeowners overpay simply because they never applied. If you're planning a move, don't just compare home prices, compare long-term costs. Property tax is one of the few expenses that can outlive your mortgage. Where you buy determines how long you pay. And if you're retired or close to it, this matters more than almost anything else. Fixed incomes don't stretch when taxes keep rising. If this breakdown helped you see housing differently, hit the like button so more people find this information. Subscribe and turn on notifications for honest analysis on housing, taxes, and where Americans are actually winning and losing in this economy. Share this video with anyone thinking about moving, retiring, or buying a home. This kind of information changes lives, but only if it spreads. And drop a comment below. Which state surprised you the most? And do you think zero property tax should be the standard nationwide? The rules are changing. The smart move is learning them before they're rewritten. We'll see you in the next one.